everybody, it's Romania Black, and we're on episode 6 of season 3 of Psychopaths. And I don't know, is this. I have my rule of 8, which usually applies to 11 through 13 episode seasons or series, but this season's only 8 episodes. So technically, is the rule of 8 supposed to happen now? I don't know. So this week, we basically had last week setting up a lot of different plot points. We had Kay's wife is getting eye surgery. We have this smuggling ring that we're trying to track down in hopes that we can maybe finally find a way to track down Azusawa and get him connected in all this. We don't know much about Miyano Mamoru's character, except that he has a very handsome borzoi and he looks really good walking it. So there's a whole bunch of plot lines that were set up in the last episode, and it would make sense if we took all that set up from episode 5, episode 6, which is kind of our pseudo rule of 8 episode, kind of puts those different plot lines into conflict or into motion, and then episode 7, the penultimate episode, brings it all to a head, and then episode 8 is the resolution. But knowing that there are other pieces of media with Psychopaths after season 3, it could be we may not get a resolution by episode 8. It may lead straight into the movies, which would be interesting because I do know that there is like at least a movie after this. So I don't know what all else. I haven't clicked on the little moderator thing, but I'm pretty sure there's a movie. So we'll see what happens with that as we get closer. But yeah. I don't have any comments to really talk about for this episode, except that everybody likes Shindo. Everybody's jealous of Frederica having access to all these guys in her team. We haven't seen much of her team, which I feel like they're going to make an appearance at least by the end of this season, if not beyond. We'll see. But yeah, it's incredibly hot outside, and so I cranked down my air conditioning to where it'd be really cool in here, and now it is really cool in here, and so I need a jacket and like a blanket. I'm like, oh, now it's too cool in here, but that's okay. That's okay. Psychopaths are going to warm us up, so it'll be all right. But yeah, the only thing that I'm really curious about going into this episode is, especially Frederica's group with Sugo and Kogami and Ganoza, we haven't seen them hardly at all. So I assume they're going to show back up again. But are we going to get resolution with Akane by the end of this season? I feel like this season is mostly resolving the case for Shindo and Kei. And I don't know if that's going to end up being related to Akane, and then the media that we have for Psychopaths after this season will boomerang back to Akane and Kogami and them. And are we going to just finish Kei and Shindo's story up here in this season? I don't know yet. I don't know if Shindo and Kei will stick around beyond this season, or if they're going to get wrapped up and then be able to move on their way. I don't know. If his wife lives through the surgery and she can see, then we may get, knock on wood, Kei and Shindo getting a happy ending. But I don't know. It's Psychopaths, so literally anything could happen. But before we start, I want to take a real quick second to thank our philanthropy tier over on Patreon. I want to thank all of the patrons and all the subscribers. You all are amazing for supporting me and what I do. But those in the philanthropy tier, they get a special shout out each week. So special thanks goes to Alex Cornejo, to Anime Annie, to Be Happy, to Bryant Reed, to Dana, to Danger Zone, to Danny Donmai, to Destiny Marie, to Davarin, as well as to Ichu, to Eric, to Hongya He, to Kiri, to Elfreya, to Lyndon, to Matthew Palfinier, to Murphew, to Nameless Monster, Nicholas, as well as Ninths, Inley 2, Sunspots, Trails, Shimoyama, and Translucent Men. Thank you all so much for all of your support. I greatly appreciate it. All of my love. So yeah, I got some coffee. I got my blankets. I'm pretty warm right now. I may have to chuck this jacket off when we're done with this episode because I'll probably be too hot, but that's okay. So we're going to start episode 6 of Psychopath season 3, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's do it to it, Lars. I had to chuck the jacket. I was sweating when that episode got over. I was sweating. I had to chuck the blanket off, chuck the jacket. I should have known. If I'm feeling cold, just watch an episode of Psychopaths and it will raise your blood pressure, your hue, and your body temperature. I swear, if they do something to Kay and May, if Mai and Kay are hurt in any way, shape, or form, I will riot. No, you all don't understand. Maybe you do. I don't want Kay to be hurt. I like had horrible images in this episode that they were either going to like induce them into the eternal white, which it looks like it's a little bit more complicated than it initially seemed, so that's good. And then I was like, what if they turn them into suicide bombers? Why am I going to the most grotesque, horrible solutions? But that's where my mind went, so I was like, no. I definitely think they're going to try to use Mai to torture Kay, which is, the only good thing about this is that the first person she's going to see is going to be her husband. But my fear is he's going to be like a big, bruised, bloody mess. And that's the first thing she's going to see. Why? Just, This episode raised my anxiety levels through the roof. But that's what it was intended to do. Oh my gosh. Definitely the rule of 8 is this episode. So we had a lot explained in this episode. I was like, I apologize if I was not very emotive during this episode, but I was sitting there like soaking it all in, being like, what is happening? What are we finding out? What's going on? And then it just kept getting more and more tense, and I kept just like wanting to sink further and further into my chair, being like, no, I don't like it when it gets this way. I was like, why are bad things happening? It's almost like I signed up to watch this show where bad things happen. But I do think it's a testament. I think it's a testament to the characters that it gets us this riled up about this season, because I was talking with the moderators about it, and I said it last week. When 80% of your cast has been completely reassigned and you've had only like 5 episodes to get to know them, it really says something for a series when you get invested in these characters that you barely have had time to spend with, and you really want to root for them, but also you care about them and you don't want them to get hurt. And it's like, ugh. So yeah, I just, Psychopaths, do me a solid and just keep Mai and Kay okay. All right. But we did find a lot, like particularly with Tori's mom, his mother that looks amazing. She's like got that J-Lo body, like at age 50. Excuse me, hi MILF, how you doing? I just did not expect her to be his mother. I was like, what? And it seems like in a biological sense, because they talk about parent and child, and I was like, what is happening? The genes in that family, oh my God. Hello. They also talk about how her brother had been a politician, or a congressman, so that's interesting. So we need to talk about this. So we're gonna put Tori up here on the board. And we find out Tori is also one of the inspectors for this whole Bifrost thing. He's the 3rd inspector, right? He's the 3rd, which is good to know. I think, was Inomiya the 2nd? No. Susagawa was the 7th. So we don't know who the 2nd inspector is. Maybe it's Obata. Maybe Obata's the 2nd inspector. I could see that, and she's just working under Azusawa because she just wants to get paid. So she certainly doesn't want to get laid by him. So then we have Azusawa, who I also want to call Asasawa, but it's Azusawa, who is our 1st inspector. Okay. So we've got him up there. All right. And they're all vying. I guess we might as well break this down on the corporate ladder, right? So basically we have these inspectors. We don't know who the 2nd one is, so we'll just leave that for now. But we have Azusawa is basically the next in line. And he's the 1st inspector. I wonder if maybe O'Brien could be the 2nd inspector, or maybe Atsushi had one of the cards. Was Shindo's dad one of the inspectors? Maybe, possibly. We'll just put Shindo's dad, Atsushi, over here as possibly an inspector as well, which is very curious. But then we have the congressmen. They're up here, right? The congressmen are connected here with the beef. They call it Bifrost, but it's Bifrost. Bifrost and the Round Robin. And the Round Robin selects its representatives, apparently. It seems to be, the congressman seems to be entitled with Bifrost seems to, in some way, shape, or form, be a form like Sybil that is a governing agency. I am fascinated by this concept that the entirety of Japan is basically being ruled. I mean, it makes sense because if you think about it, most governments are just a select group of people enacting laws and doing everything on behalf of the entire country. That's like that in America. It's like that in several countries across the world. I mean, that part's not very hard to understand. What's interesting is the idea of inserting artificial intelligence into the mix, because Sybil System is essentially AI. Sybil System is basically the Public Safety Bureau is basically AI that just has some humans running it, right? Is essentially what it is. Whereas what's interesting is that Bifrost seems to be the counterpart to that, the opposite of that. Bifrost seems to be AI that is run by humans. Because you have AI, which is the round robin, and then you have the congressmen that enact and make the decisions within it. So you kind of have two systems that are polar opposite of each other. Sybil System makes decisions, and the Public Safety Bureau carries them out. Right? It makes decisions about society. It makes decisions about what hues mean, what qualifies as latent criminal, what doesn't. And then the people in the Public Safety Bureau enact those laws that the Sybil System creates. And Akane was challenging that, saying that, no, we shouldn't let Sybil System make our laws. We should make the laws, and Sybil System is the system in which we help keep those in place. So Akane's setup and mindset seems to kind of almost be more in line with Bifrost. Because Bifrost seems, from what we know now, to be a system where it's controlling different aspects of the economy, different aspects of the government, and it has three people that are, there's only three congressmen, and they all sit there and they go round robin and play a game where, okay, it's my turn to play Risk. I'm going to put all my money into infrastructure, and now I'm going to put my money over here, and we're going to see how it plays out. And they just keep going until somebody loses, and then someone else takes their place potentially. So it's an AI system that the humans run, which is contrast to Sybil System. That's what it seems like so far. There's still a lot of questions as to where Bifrost is located at, what it has to do with the little diagrams that Azusawa has, because he says, can you figure out my diagrams? What does that have to do with anything? There's still a lot that we don't know, but everything's starting to come into place. And it seems like Shizuka, who is Miyano Mamoru's character, he's trying to it feels like he's the new one into the system, and he just got there. And I think he is connected to Sybil somehow. I feel like he's maybe a mole for Sybil, because Sybil wanted him to infiltrate maybe and find out what the deal is, because he was in that Sinners in the System special. I know he has a connection with Sybil System. Something's going on there. We just don't know the full picture. This episode was just an absolute ball of stress. I felt like my hue was raising watching it, because I was like, it's like everything that you think could go wrong, it does go wrong. And there's so many things that I was like, for one thing, I don't know, last episode, I don't know how much I talked about it, but the hollow idea of them impersonating the family members, at first I was like, oh, that's a smart idea. That seems relevant. But then once this episode starts and they're talking to Tori, I'm like, how good do you all know him? Because I feel like you all know him pretty well, or the relatives should know him pretty well, because he has special rings for you all, and you all seem to be on an in-knowledge basis. So those types of scenarios terrify me, because in real life, if you're impersonating someone's family, they probably know things about you, or they know things that, unless you've been doing a lot of research, they would know things that aren't public knowledge. So it would be very easy to out somebody in that moment of being like, ugh. And plus, I thought that when Kisaragi had that moment of being shocked at Alma's death, one, I thought that Alma was the one that sent her flowers, but no, it was Azusawa. And then two, I was like, if she heard someone die, I didn't think it was that out of the realm for her to be shocked. But if Tori understands her and she's like a stone cold bitch, then yeah, her reaction would seem out of the ordinary, and he'd be like, that seems weird that you had that reaction. Just a lot of tension for no reason. So I say no reason, but it's all to build for the next episode to make us feel on edge, which, So yeah. So he's like, we're expanding our reach and our teachings more effectively. So I did want to point out the little rings, the signet rings that Tori gives to the two of them. The episode is called Caesar's Gold Coins, which is the idea of Caesar being this ruler who spread his wealth around to bribe people, to get people to go along with him, but also there's a Latin teacher online. I went to Quora. Somebody was saying, did Julius Caesar have a symbol that he used, like a signet ring? And I was trying to find information about the gold coins. There weren't a lot of gold coin information other than people trying to sell me Caesar's gold coins. But I know that Caesar, was a politician in many respects, did a lot of bribery, did a lot of things with politics and with money. So the gold coins, the idea of people trying to coerce one another through bribery was laden throughout this episode, so that makes sense. But I thought it was interesting to note that this Latin teacher points out that Caesar did have a signet ring that had a picture of the goddess of Venus Victrix on it. The word Victrix means she who conquers. The reason for that, according to this teacher, is that Julius Caesar's clan, the Julii, claimed to be descendants of Venus via a Trojan refugee named Ascanius, or Lullus, whose father was the son of Venus, Aeneas, and he carried his aging father, his household gods, and led his son, the famed forefather of Caesar, and a pack of intrepid and recently homeless Trojans on a long and perilous journey around the Mediterranean, ending up in Italy, where Aeneas married an Italian princess, and they became the forefathers of Romulus and Remus, the alleged twin founders of the cities. Although Romulus committed fratricide, and Remus had mocked his walls after Remus had mocked his walls, so it says, if you believe the hype. So supposedly, and it says Augustus, his heir, chose 3 signet designs: the Sphinx, Alexander the Great, and his own likeness. Long story short, the signet rings are tied to Caesar, and that's where that comes from. So I thought that was pretty cool. I was like, all right, that's a nice little tie into everything with Caesar. Pretty neat. But yeah, that whole scene with them getting the rings, it's just enough to make you antsy. And so Kisaragi, I honestly, if I'm being truly honest with y'all, I don't hold out hope for Kisaragi. I really don't. I don't know if she's going to make it through this season. She might, but this is going to be really mean to say, and I'm sorry, y'all can hate me in the comments, but if we got to sacrifice Kisaragi or Kay, I'm going to pull for Kisaragi to get the boot. I'm sorry. We just haven't had a lot with her. And now she has ties with Azusawa. And I'm sure that's going to come out. And they're going to be like, did you betray us? And she's going to be like, no, but. And so that's going to be a big old thing. But I don't know. If we have to sacrifice Kisaragi to save Kay and his wife, I'm sorry, Kisaragi. We haven't had as much development with you. So you kind of might have to be the red shirt this season. I don't know. But I don't know what the series is going to do. It may very well kill off Kay and Mai. It may kill them off, because part of this season has been talking about Shindo being able to use his mental trace without his anchor, without Kay. And the idea of Kay that's now come out, we have this idea of Shindo being able to do the trace, which he did at the very end of the episode. And this idea of, even though Kay wants to protect others, and that is seems to be his MO, the real thing is that he oftentimes relies on others to protect him. So that kind of revealed that Kay needs an anchor as much as he wants to be an anchor for other people. I could see it going one of two ways. I could see it being that Shindo is able to be the anchor for Kay and rescue him, and that's the big arc with their characters, and that they end up being anchors for each other and save each other. That would be great. If Shindo could rescue Kay and Mai, let's do that. But then another part of me is like, I would not be surprised if this show kills off Kay to make Shindo have a development. And plus, if we're looking at it as if we're looking at Shindo like Akane, which Mika makes the comparison, then are we viewing Kay like Kogami? Or is Kay like Ganoza? I don't know. And would Kisaragi end up living and then live out because using Kay as inspiration? I don't know. This show can do whatever it wants, and I see 3 or 4 distinct paths in front, and I don't know which one the show is going to pick, and it makes me want to jump off a building. Not really. But it makes me so anxious. I'm like, show, I don't know if I'm going to be able to wait. I don't know if I'm going to be able to wait to watch. I may end up having to watch. I'm sorry. I may have to watch ahead. Y'all may have to excuse me on that one. But anyway, so we go back to Hinakawa. Hinakawa's in the tower, and he's like, that's the rundown on the serial terrorist bombings. And you could definitely hear Sakurai's voice in this part of the episode. You could hear the underlying tone of his voice, which is really cute. He says, the undercover investigation has just begun, so I can't comment on it. But we're reinvestigating the previous inspector's accident. And then his little smiley face, I'm going to get a picture of it. His little smile, like looking over at Akane and like trying to give her little updates. It was really sweet. And we don't get to hear what she's saying to him. But he's like, that's all. But then there's Mika. Like, and he has that little smile. And then Mika's like, are you talking to another woman that's not me? Here's my thing. I am a lot more tolerant of Mika in this season than I definitely was in season 2 and in the Sinners in the System series. I think Mika has matured a lot. I think Mika has matured. She definitely can stand on her own 2 feet. She's making more leaderly decisions. But I do think this episode shows that she is not completely over all of her flaws. One, like I talked about in the OP, I feel like Akane is just somebody that Mika doesn't like. And I think Mika respects Akane. I think she wants the best for her. But for some reason, and maybe it's not that she doesn't like Akane. I think Akane brings out some of the worser traits in Mika. I think Akane brings out Mika's flaws. Because Mika has some flaws. She is very stubborn. She definitely is not compassionate towards latent criminals or people who have been rejected in the Hughes. She's not compassionate towards them at all, which we'll talk about in this episode. And she does make some decisions that I think Akane would be like, why are you doing that? So I feel like Akane brings out some of the worst traits in Mika, and whenever Akane is around, Mika I feel like Akane is such a bright light that it casts this dark shadow over Mika, and Mika feels inadequate, and she feels like she's not doing as well as she could, and that leads her to kind of have some like flaws come out that normally wouldn't. Because I do think it is relevant that she tells Hinakawa being like, prioritize the present Division 1, not the past one. And I see why she would say that, because she's like, don't get so, Akane's off doing her own thing. She's there for a reason. Don't get too caught up in her. Focus on your team now, right? Because I could see Mika relating to herself, being like, don't let your past dictate your present, because she would be one to talk, right? So I get why she's saying that, but there is like an underlying, she, maybe is a little bit jealous of Akane still, even throughout all of this. I don't know. Anyway, we go to the warehouse where Sister Shinogi and O'Brien had been working to expedite the naturalization process for refugees. They disarmed the refugees in Dejima, and they could have obtained military explosives. Okay, and so there's the idea of the bombs being built. Yep, the vaporized elements. So as far as we know, all the bombs are gone. We had the 2 that had exploded before this episode started. We had one that was in the warehouse where the rental cars were, one that killed Alma, and then the final one was used to actually kill Tori's cousins, which were the Zachariases. So we're going to put Zacharias. And they're both dead now. Which is interesting that they both were killed off because they're related to Tori and one of the congressmen, but we'll talk about that later when we get to it. So Shindo's like, what do we do about this? Meanwhile, at Heaven's Leap, in this very, very... I do love the architecture of this church. Has this like sci-fi futuristic feel to it. It's really interesting. He's like, we have 40,000 adherents in this facility. 500 lead a communal life in our headquarters. As immigrants with clouded hues, they would otherwise be passed from facility to facility. So On the surface, it does seem like they are doing good work, whereas these immigrants would normally be preyed upon and just passed around to different facilities. Here they have a structure and they have a faith and they have a way to like keep things regulated. And on the surface, that seems really great and all, right? But there is some shady stuff going on under the surface, of course. And we find out that's not talking about like the hue drugs and everything, the eternal white and all of that. So he's like, I want to talk to Mr. Nasai. Now, it makes sense. I do love the architecture and design of, like, the inner sanctuary where Nisai is, like, praying, like, all the different heads and everything. It looked very Seraph of the End with, like, all the angelic architecture and design. Super, super cool. Find out he's actually been kept in this vegetative state while Tori carries out his business. Meanwhile, when they leave the facility and they leave Nisai, they like go outside and there's like one guy getting taken away by the doctors. I like they're in the plague masks. Now, let's be real for a hot second. Them calling the people that are being subjugated and taken away for having some hue problems, calling them bottoms. Show you couldn't have came up with anything less than that. I was just like, oh, okay, well, we can only be tops in this church, so just so we're clear. I was like, oh God, oh no. But yeah, so them getting taken away, the doctors are being these people taking them away to the eternal white or whatever, basically sneaking them in to be put into stasis, right? To cover up all the flaws that might be there with the therapy sessions. I think it's interesting that Kisaragi has a lot of skepticism and a lot of hesitation with the church and what they're doing, saying that it's not possible to improve hues that quickly. She has a lot of hesitation and doesn't seem like it's something possible. And she's like, why do they believe in that fraud? Does religion just prey on the weak? And it's like, well, sometimes some do, but I like the idea that Kay says no, they need someone to reach out to them when everyone else has abandoned them. And I think that that's so good to note because as an immigrant, Kay understands what that feels like when everyone else has abandoned you and you have nowhere to go. And how vulnerable that makes you. And the idea that he understands just as well as anybody that sometimes you need someone else as an anchor. And I think Shindo, for as much as Shindo believes that Kay is his anchor, Shindo is very much an anchor to Kay, and that they're like platonic soulmates. I love that about them, which is another reason why this episode's so frustrating, right? And she's like, well, you don't ever look like you need any help. And he's like, oh, I do. And at that point, I was like, oh, I don't feel comfortable with this. I don't think good things are going to happen to Kay. I don't like this. So anyway, that's when they find out that Alma has died. And they're like, there's this method called Eternal White, a treatment that can clear any hue for good. Which is basically just putting you in a coma until it's cleared, I guess. But, so Alma is dead, which sucks. But then we find out that the reason why Alma died, part of the reason was that he was keeping a bomber from hitting the side building next to the factory. Whereas the factory, it makes sense not to hit because it has like the water supply and everything that would shut it down. But it's like, why spare the little tin shack? And then we find out that there was basically a human trafficking ring with immigrants. And Alma was trying to stop that, to help them, those who escaped the brothels. Which is, I like the framing of our group, like throughout this episode when they all show up, especially Shindo. Shindo looks very mature in this episode. Also, all of the emotion that Shindo had to portray in the voice acting in this episode, I know why they got Yuki Kaji now. That all makes so much sense. I was like, if you're going to get a guy to be like both cutesy and do super over the top dramatic like yelling and emoting, Yuki Kaji's your man. He can do that. I was getting, during the warehouse scene with the rental cars, I was getting Eren Yeager vibes, and I was like, ooh, okay, Yuki Kaji, all right, I'm seeing some Eren voice acting up in this. But basically, so we had Alma, and we had Shinogi, and we had O'Brien, And then there was another one. I guess Tori was in on it. But the idea of it was it's basically pro-immigrant reform and to try to keep the human trafficking and stuff like that at bay while they're doing this with the special zone. So they were all working together trying to help immigrants in a way. But here's the thing. I like that at first they're like, well, why don't they said the risk of deportation for deteriorating cues in the prostitution. And then what does Timma say there? He says, why don't they report it to Public Safety Bureau? And Shindo says, well, when they're all latent criminals. And later on, Mika reinforces that by saying the Public Safety Bureau only cares about people with good hues. We don't care about people that have bad hues. They're the latent criminals. It reminds me a lot of My Hero Academia, where there's a character in that series that he's in that series, everybody's labeled as heroes or villains. It's very comic booky. But in My Hero Academia, there is a villain, and he kind of points out the flaw in the system. He's like, yeah, the heroes help people as long as you're good. He's like, they don't help you if you're a bad person. They put you in jail. They don't try to help you rehabilitate or help you become better. They only care if you're a good person. And I was like, ooh. And so that kind of is reflected here in this episode where Shindo's like, yeah, Mika told me, focus on the people with good hues. The criminals we don't care about. And I'm like, Which is so hilarious. That in itself is like telling me that I can't ship Mika and Ganoza, because Mika would be like, well, you're a criminal. I don't care. And she's constantly, I know some people, I don't judge anybody that ships Mika and Ganoza. Y'all do you. No judgment. But I know some people treat it as like, oh, she's just playing hard to get. And I'm like, no, she fundamentally doesn't like him. She fundamentally does not like Ganoza because he's a latent criminal. She doesn't respect him in the same vein. She may respect him, but I don't think enough to be a romantic partner. But if you ship them together, that's cool. You keep on doing that. I can't ship Mika and Ganoza for that reason alone. I can ship Mika all day long with Frederica, though. Two boss women. Their ship name should be Boss Bitch, because they're both two women in charge fighting over who's more in charge. And the fact that Mika's like, well, I'll be in your debt. And Frederica's like, yes, accrue all the debt you want. It feels very much like we'll handle our debt situation out of the office. And I'm like, okay. I definitely ship Frederica and Mika all day long. Mika needs to be handled by somebody with some authority. So Alma opposed the prostitution ring, clearly, and he gave his life to protect them so that they couldn't escape. And they're like, what are you all gonna do? And so I like that Shima gets Mika to call in Frederica to do something about the prostitution ring. And she's like, you want to move them to Dejima for psychological care. And I do like the fact that Frederica kind of calls Mika out a little bit on how saying, Mika, you say that you're not interested in helping people that are possibly latent criminals, and you're not interested in doing this, but yet you came to me, someone you say you don't like, to ask me to help you do something you don't want to do. Are you being genuine, girl? And so maybe if that's the case, maybe that's your reason to ship Mika and Ganoza, but I just can't do it. I mean, I'm not opposed to it, but it's just not for me. But yeah. And then Frederica tries to get her off from looking into Heaven's Leap, which Frederica has had some great suggestions so far. She's like, maybe you should not do this. Maybe you should back off and let us continue to do our work. No? Okay. But so far, whenever they've kind of interfered, it's kind of gone awry. But, and so Mika and Frederica just keep arguing at who's bothering who and who's in each other's business. And it's like, she's like, your job is to protect people with healthy hues, understand, not worry about the prostitutes. Anyway, so they find out what's in the back room. It's basically all of these assault rifles being created. So while this one organization is trying to do good and keeping the immigrants from being human trafficked, at the same time, they're also creating assault weapons that could be used to cause even more destruction and violence. So it's an issue. It's a problem. And the thing about it is, I feel like that everybody there, even though I'm sure Alma and O'Brien and Shinogi were all acting towards pro-immigration rights and things like that. I feel like Tori is kind of the outlier because their mom is a congressman and their mom is kind of over circling a bigger picture. So I feel like she's giving him information that's making him act without maybe even the others knowing about it. So it seems like he might go rogue at some point away from the other three or try to kill the other three. So can we talk about Eternal White for a hot second? These caskets that are literally just putting them in stasis that are a life support device for people in vegetative states. And that's clearing up their hues. So they talk about, and Tori gets really upset at this. Tori gets mad when it's brought up the idea of the disease. We're going to have it starts with an E, like the Eustace disease or something. The disorder is going to get brought up, and Tori's like, that's not a disorder. And they're like, yeah, Azusawa calls it out and says that it's ODing on hue changing drugs. That is like such a crazy connection from season 1 to season 2 to now. Because on the one hand, I feel like Mikishima, when he was talking about the disease in season 1, Mikishima was talking about how it was just people who had kind of become so disillusioned within the system. They either were so trying to keep their hues stable so much that it drove them to the point of just being bland husks of themselves, or they'd become so disassociated because of trying to keep their hues clear that it just caused them to go into this vegetative state. It seemed like a disease and disorder that was caused by the Sybil system. Then we get into the second season where they talk about the drugs that were being used to help lower people's hues and their numbers, their crime coefficients, and make them more stabilized. And now it seems like you have those two things running together, where you have people who are ODing on the hue stabilizers and they're ending up in the same status as those that had the disease from the first season, and now they're considered correlated, which maybe they've always been correlated. Maybe those people were taking drugs and overdosed and that's how they ended up in that state. We don't know. But now it's almost like they're linked together, which is so fascinating to me. And the fact that Tori doesn't like it is very interesting as well. But Tori signed off on it. So then we have Azusawa leading around our dear congresswoman. And he says little Tori's doing well. Don't you agree, madame? And she's like, who are you calling madame? You don't need to butter me up. Mm-hmm. And yeah, Azusawa is treading a very thin line. He's like, the special religious zone is a tough task. He's like, I mean it. And she's like, oh, thanks for the warning. Do you want to be a congressman? And he's like, yes, all inspectors aim for that lofty position. So anybody that's an inspector for Bifrost is aiming to be part of the Congress that's up there. I can't ever decide if her dress just has like nude lace underneath or if it's part of the outfit or the necklace. The design of it is just insane. It also, the top, the red part of it that blooms out looks like a vile plume, which is really cool. But yeah, so Azusawa wants to be in the room where it happens. He wants to go and be part of the congressman. To get closer to the truth of the world. And she's like, oh, the truth, you say? I feel like she's like, the truth ain't that hard. We're just a group of people making all the decisions for the country. That's the truth of it, which is interesting. I find it fascinating that the inspectors with Bifrost are all aiming to like learn the secrets of the Bifrost system, whereas the inspectors with the Sybil system have no clue the Sybil system is even what it is, and thus are not asking any questions or are not aiming to have any lofty political ambition. It's funny, again, how those two systems are different, right? How they're structured very, very different from one another. But anyway, she's like, the only equal to Sybil system in our society is Bifrost. And he's like, I know that, of course. And he seems, I can't get a read on Azusawa at all. He looks so dorky, and whenever he's around Obata, he's super cheesy and weird. But then here, even when he's serious, there's just like kind of like a teddy bear quality to him that I can't explain. It makes him very dangerous because you don't think he's much of a threat, but then clearly you've seen what he can do. And that's kind of the scary part about him. So anyway, they go back to Bifrost and they propose all these bailouts and do all this. Suzuka rejects it, but it passes anyway. And then we see like them putting more and more money onto the table. And he's like, I do oppose the special zone, but for the sake of restoring predatory economics, I agree to make Newtown an internal black market relay. So basically making the Newtown with the immigrants an opposition to the black market underground. Makes sense. Makes sense. But then they're like, isn't it extravagant for the dealer to propose a relation hedge? And they're like, have you guessed the relation? And they're like, I wonder. So they're talking about Tori. That's her son, right? He's like, the way you're going about this, Shizuka, you stand to incur incalculable losses if the public safety investigation fails. But Shizuka, he says that that'll be the end for me then. He's betting that they're going to do fine. So it seems like I have a feeling next episode, if we cut back to them, that they're going to count Shizuka out, saying that's all over for the Public Safety Bureau, and Shizuka's going to have the last laugh. I'm hoping that's the case. I'm hoping Shizuka somehow has the last laugh. That'd be great. Otherwise, they're going to boot him out and try to put Tori or somebody in. So, the attacks to crush the pro-special zone advocates. There's more to it than that, though. If we assume that they had other reasons to kill the bombing victims, this seems to be likely involved. Okay, so we finally get this watch. This damn watch. The last episode, it was driving me crazy. They wouldn't show me what it says inside. Now it's right here for us to see. And you know what it says in Latin? Or the way I will find or I will do. That's all. I'm curious if I look at this here without just the translation. That was Google Translate. Oh, here we go. Oh, it says, I shall either find a way or make one. It's a phrase that's been attributed to Hannibal when his generals told him it was impossible to cross the Alps by elephant. This was supposedly his response. The first part of the sentence, in viam, I shall find a way, appears in the other context of tragedies of Seneca, spoken by Hercules and by Oedipus, and by Seneca's Hercules Firenze. The whole sentence appears in third person. Inveniet viam aut vasa faciet. It's been used as a motto by Francis Bacon and Robert Peary. It's still popular in social, educational, and military organizations. So, yeah, the idea that I shall either find a way or make one, that would tie with their goal of doing the pro-immigrant, like, work that they've been doing in the country, being like, we'll either find a way to make this work or we'll push away and carve it out ourselves. That all makes sense. Glad we got to the bottom of that watch. So the four people, it wasn't Tori. No. Okay, this is what it is. It was Nisei was part of it, but Nisei has been taken out by Tori, who is connected to the Congress, so that he's the fox in the hen house. Oh, okay. He's literally a fox in a hen house. Oh my God. So yes, Shinogi and Alma and O'Brien and Nisei were the ones targeted. All right. And so Alma's been taken out, right? And Shinogi, for all we know, we don't know about her situation. O'Brien is supposedly alive, and Nisei is basically dead. But Tori has come in as the little fox to, like, sneak in there. Oh, okay. Well, that makes more sense. I don't know. We're going to have to come back to that vision of who helped O'Brien. Because there clearly was a bomber there. So why cover it up if O'Brien's still alive? And does anyone else know that O'Brien has cancer and is dying himself? So, of course, there's this, like, special thing that we can't deduce or break down because we don't have all of the watches together. Boo. All the microchips. I do love when Erie's like, hey, Shindo, let's go out together and solve this thing. And Shindo's like, yeah, he looks so sweet and cute. Bless his heart. So they go to this arms dealer. And again, the reason why they had Shindo be voiced by Yuki Kaji is because he pulls it off really well. He does a really good job of pulling off that goofy voice during all of that. Yeah. Oh my God. He very much sounded like Aaron Yeager in that moment, which is what reminded me of it. I do like the whole adventures with Erie and Shindo definitely made this feel like just like a cop drama that you'd watch every week. My parents watch a lot of cop dramas, and so this just felt like that scene with the broker underground felt like a scene that I would watch on a weekly show with them if I was over at their house watching. Seems legit. Anyway, so then they sneak in to see Nisei, but their hologram had almost like ran out of power, which sucks. But then, you know, if they already knew it was them, it wasn't going to matter anyway, which is very frustrating. But he had the watch too. So then we find out that Tori, his crime coefficient was like mulberry purple and was already 90.3 when he arrived there. So it was already almost over 100. And supposedly his hue has been cleared. And now that I'm getting a look at Tori and seeing his eyes, he definitely has the same eyes as the Congresswoman. My thing is, I'm like, did the Congresswoman and Mikishima like shack up and have him? I know that's not possible, but he really does look like Mikishima's son. He really does. And I'm like, I know it's not possible, but they do look nearly related. And he's like, now that you've seen the founder, this is a problem. And what did he say there? He's like, I wanted to leave you free to flush out the spies with the foreign affairs. And at that point, Kay is like, foreign affairs? And he's like, you're a terrible liar. Mm-hmm. He's like, yeah, no. Ugh, damn it. You're a poor actor. Shit, I hate it. I don't like it at all. I hate this part where they're getting wheeled away. I don't like it, and they're going to get tortured. Nope. Poor Kay. And he's like, first, hard at work, I see. Third. Mm-hmm. And what do they say there? Yeah. It's so scary. And they don't know that he's Azusawa. They don't know he's the guy. Because they only call themselves first and third. They don't know it's Azusawa he's looking at. Damn it. No. That sucks. And of course, Azusawa, he knew her. Because he was like, where are the roses? Not enough. Red roses would suit you. Ah, damn it. Better than handcuffs. What a shame. I hate it. So as they get led away, then we have Azusawa talking with Tori, and he's like, are you okay with the founder's absence? And he's like, oh, well, the founder is present. And he's like, that's Eustress disease. Yes, that's a disease called Eustress deficiency. Uh-huh. Interesting. And then, of course, I like that he gets kind of angry at that. He's like, it's no disease. And Azusawa's like, yeah, it is. He's like, bitch, it is a disease. He's like, and you're making people have it. He's like, you're incredible that you think that it's not. He's like, you invented a system that can induce Eustress deficiency in others. And that's the whole thing with the eternal white. Oh, I love it. And he's like, no, I don't want to be happy. He's like, I love my job more than personal happiness. There's just some like slimy charm about Azusawa. It's weird. He like has this slimy charm. Like he kind of seems like a loser, but then you're terrified of him. I can't describe it, but I like that he just kind of calls out Tori and is like, yeah, you're kind of like not helping your cause by doing this. And then that's when Tori says, violence is not permitted by Sybil. Violence not permitted by Sybil is abominable. So as long as Sybil tells us what to do, we're fine. I think it's interesting how you have the Congresswoman, who is his mom, who are working with Bifrost and Round Robin, which seem to be like against Sybil's system. They say that they're on par with Sybil, but it seems like they're actively working against Sybil's system. But then you have Tori, who seems on board with Sybil's system, but thinking that everything he's doing is in line with what Sybil would want. So I'm like, does Tori know about Bifrost? And he does, though, because she tells him about it. So interesting. Again, we don't know everything yet. So I'm curious. It's like, it's this big game of like, who knows what and who doesn't know what. Meanwhile, this whole scene with Shindo and Mai in the operating room, where he's like in the shadows and oh, excuse me, when he's like in the shadows talking to her, and that symbolism that he knows and thinks that Kay is in danger and doesn't want to tell her to make her worried. Oh my God. And of course she's going to find out next episode and probably be freaked out. And her hue's probably going to deteriorate. And what do? She just gained her damn sight back. But that scene, all the symbolism of him in the shadows talking, and when he like clenches the bed sheets because he doesn't want to grab her hand, because he doesn't want to take the chance that she could feel the tension from him or feel that something was off. So he grabs the sheets next to her. It's like, oh, it's such a damn good scene. I love it, and I hate it because then she's like, well, I'll be able to see Kay. I'm sure everything's going to be right as rain. And I'm like, and their hands are so close to touching, but they're just still far away because they can't be. Ugh, it sucks so much. I hate it. I'm like, I want things to be happy for them. And I'm just like, ugh. I'm just afraid she's going to have her hue deteriorated now to the point where they can't be together. And I'm like, what do we do? Meanwhile, he gets the idea through the rental cars to go check them out, and they find all the different supplies for the guns. I thought for a second that maybe the woman that let them in might be, you know, somebody that was going to betray them because they kept focusing on her. But then she ends up being a hostage. So it's like, okay, that was why that happened. All right. But yeah, they find the diamonds used for smuggling, and then they discover O'Brien's son has been back at the Coliseum, but he's been the one that's been taken care of and been on life support. And Shinogi's just been taking care of him. I feel like Shinogi and O'Brien had an affair if that's not her kid. Anyway, so she's trying to lead them back so they can save O'Brien's kid. And then we have the whole scene in the warehouse. I am surprised that the enforcers, like, one, I'm surprised the enforcers were able to, like, shove Shindo away. He's the inspector that's in charge. Not Eri, not Tima, not Hinakawa. They're all enforcers. Shindo's the one that should have the last say. So, one, I'm amazed that they were able to get away with disobeying him and didn't get reprimanded, and that Mika didn't reprimand them. I'm like, what? And then she gets on to Shindo because she's like, well, your enforcer saved your life, because if you hadn't, that guy would have blown up and probably hurt you all. So it's good that they, you know, enacted justice on that man who was a latent criminal. I'm just like, on the one hand, I'm like, Mika, I do get why you're saying that to him, because yeah, if he had, even though Shindo wanted to save him, there probably was no way to do so. I get why Shindo acted the way he did. I get why Tima was like, no, I gotta save you. But I'm like, if Mika had been in Shindo's shoes and they had disobeyed her, she would have been chewing them out left and right. She would have been like, how dare you not listen to me? Like all the stuff she said to Ganoza back in season 2, she would have been all over it. But it's almost like the latent criminal getting put to justice oversaw the fact that Shindo was an enforcer in charge. Like this had more weight than Shindo being in charge. And I'm like, Mika, girl, her priorities, put the ones that the civil system deems to be criminals to justice. That seems to take more precedence over his authority. But I think the reason that she was like that with him was because during that meeting with him, she says that he's like a Kane. And that's why she feels that she can make that judgment call, because she's like, well, you're like a Kane, and what does she know? And I'm like, girl, she's not being a hypocrite, but it's so telling of how she feels about Shindo and him relating to him to a Kane. But the voice acting by Shindo in that moment was really, really good. Yuki Kaji did a great job. And then that's when we find out about the one boy that's O'Brien's son. Yep. I do love the grumpy face that he gives Mika where he's not happy. And I am too. The one thing about it is Mika's like, well, you know what? We haven't heard from them for a while, but let's give them 12 more hours. I'm like, 12 more hours? You can do a surgery in 12 hours. You could make Kay and her into bombs in 12 hours. Why aren't we acting faster? Why are we not encouraging Frederica to hurry the hell up? I was like, Mika, again, there is a little shade of Mika from season 2 in that moment, where back in season 2, Mika did not want to take action. She wanted to let the system play out, and do things by the book. And it was like, no, we need to do this now. And she didn't want to do it. And there's like a shade of that here where I'm like, 12 hours, why not be 2? Why not be 4? Why half a day? Like, lots can happen in 12 hours. And I'm just like, girl, why are you wasting time on this? Yeah, she's like, we sent them to search the grounds in the first place, so have a little faith in them. And he's like, are we being blocked by believers in the ministry of welfare? And she's like, well, if they haven't made contact in 12 hours, then we'll send a search party. And I'm like, girl, that ain't enough time. She's like, you just clear our way. And poor Shindo, he's just like, fine, yep. And she's like, you're impatient, but you can't push yourself too hard. And I'm like, 12 hours seems like, a lot of time. She's like, your enforcers saved your life. She's like, you should thank him. And he's like, I'm not impatient. I just want to prevent more victims. It's different. And she's like, don't overdo it. You sound like Akane. I'm like, ah! So, in any case, Frederica says they're taking Zacharias off their hands. Then we get this shot of Kay. And look, here's the thing. Show, you trying to give me fan service. And I understand, but I don't want fan service at the cost of Kay being completely, like, just beaten half to death. I mean, I appreciate you giving me a peck and a shoulder, but we did not have to go this far. I'm like, damn it, no. And they just like, tell you what will happen to her if you don't tell me. He tries to use Kisaragi as bait. And poor Kay, what sucks so much is that Kay has always presented himself as this really big, strong figure. And now that we see him being tortured, like, all of that vulnerability and everything is coming out in him. And it's really hard to see. It's horrible. Like, it sucks so much. And then he's like, oh, hi, Mom. And she's like, have you gotten him to talk about the MOFA, Tori? And he's like, no, not yet. And I'm like, they're related? She's his mom? What beauty regimen does she do? Money buys a lot, apparently. So they didn't know that Nisei had ties to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is interesting. Interesting indeed. So that's interesting to note. We can eliminate their influence from the immigrant community. So basically, he was tied to Frederica's agency, which probably explains why they got involved in the first place. The moment that he went MIA, they were like, that's weird. We probably need to get involved. And so now she is trying to get Tori to eliminate his influence and to try to, and now that they think that O'Brien is dead and Alma is dead and they're after Shinogi, they're going to try to get whatever their mission was completely upturned. And poor Kay is hearing all of this, right? But is he going to remember it? That's the question. And how about your game, Mom? Oh, and she's like, oh, it's going well. There'll be an opening in Bifrost soon. And poor Kay's trying to stay awake so that he can hear all of this. I feel for him. Bless his heart. Oh, our poor boy. So she thinks that Shizuka is going to be booted out of Bifrost soon. Possibly. That's what it sounds like, because I don't think she thinks the old man's going. So she's trying to get him a spot in there as well. Because then he's like, Bifrost. And then she says, let's settle things while we can still use Azusawa as a pawn. So she doesn't think Azusawa is going to work his way up to there. She's going to try to get Tori to overtake him. Interesting. He's like, the first is buttering you up. And she's like, he's a useful man, but a dangerous one. Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like Azusawa, like, plays the role of being just a lackey, but he's dangerous. And then, their eyes are the same. It's so crazy that they're related. That's insane to me. She's like, I can only trust in the bond between a parent and child. Which I think is going to connect back to Shindo and his dad at Sushi, the same way that we have her and Tori. And she's like, and then she knows his name. Oh, when she smears the blood over his lips, she's like, that's Ignatov's brother, isn't it? She's like, perhaps we were careless. Oh, damn it. I don't like where this is headed. Nope. So anyway, then we have the meetup, and she's like, you've had Heaven's Leap marked long before we did. And she's like, why would you think that? And it's probably Nisei. She says that Zacharias is in their facility. We want the real one. And then Shindo's like, well, if you knew about that, then why haven't you done anything until now? And Mika's like, stay back, boy. And she's like, I'll get to the point. When did Sad infiltrate Heaven's Leap? And then Frederica's like, well, I don't know if that's any of your business. But somebody's there. Okay, so somebody has a handprint on the door. Who's there? Is Kogami there? Is Genoza there? Who's leaving handprints on the doors? What is happening? Damn it, I'm not going to be able to wait to watch the next episode. Ah! What is going on? I also want to point out that for my ship with Mika and Frederica, the height difference. The height difference with Frederica and Mika is not lost on me. I'm all for it. I'm living. I'm supporting it. But yeah, somebody's in there. And I'm like, if Kogami or Genoza could save Kei and Mai, that'd be great. That'd be real great. In any case, the two of them were killed by a fox. Koichi Azusawa. And he beat it to us. Damn it. So Azusawa is acting as a rogue agent, right? Azusawa is acting as a rogue agent because here's the deal. Tori and his mom are trying to use Azusawa for as much as they can until this spot opens up in the Congress, and then she wants to get her son up there with her and them have stake over everything in the government. That seems to make sense on that end. But Azusawa does not seem like the type of guy that really works for anybody else except himself. And so it seems like he was able to kill Zacharias, the relative of them, as part of the bargaining chip, but make it seem like it was all tied in with everything going on. So there's all these backstabbings and twists and turns and loyalties, and it's like, it's all over the place, and it's insane. Meanwhile, so Zacharias and them, they've been murdered. Awesome. Great. And she's like, I'm not going to lose two subordinates without a fight. And she's like, Shindo, it's all on you. She says she's going to go talk to Kasai. The Sybil system and Kasai have been largely quiet this entire season, to the point where it is suspicious. Like, Kasai and the Sybil system have, like, taken a back seat because of this whole Bifrost deal. I feel like it has something to do with Miyano Mamoru's character with Shizuka, but we don't know what yet. I feel like everything's kept close to the vest. I don't know what Mika's going to ask Kasai to do. I don't know what the plans are with that, but it all seems like it's connected, and it's all going to lead to some kind of crescendo at the end of the season, is what it seems like. Meanwhile, Shindo is like, let's get up a plan to go and rescue Kei and Kira's, whatever her faces is, Kisaragi. Yes, go rescue them. So there's a lot of K names in this damn series. But yeah, so we find out that O'Brien's son is the one that's on life support because he overdosed on the hue improvement drugs, which seems to be connected to the Eustress disease. So they're like, yep, the immigrants. So it's like the serial bombings have exposed the drug use in coefficient relief facilities. And that's all been there. And the serial bombings have exposed, and the immigrants are forced into prostitution and arms smuggling. Like, it's all a big mess, right? It's just a huge old mess. The culprit's goal is to expose the crimes this country has forced on immigrants. So the relief facilities, the smuggling rings, the arms smuggling that's happening underground. It seems like everything that they were building was designed to out the crimes that were happening against immigrants. And that's what Tori and them are trying to stop now. And Shinogi had warned us. Those four drew up a plan, but somebody else is now having hold of it. And that's Tori and the other inspectors. I do love that shot when they all look back at Shindo as he's leaving the room. It feels very much like Akane leaving the room and them all looking back towards Akane. That's what it looks like. It just, it's such a cool parallel, right? And then I love that Erie's like, look, Kay left us an email to say that we can't let you work recklessly. I love that. And I love the relationship between Erie and Shindo this season. It's been so developed, and I love the camaraderie they both have. Shindo's like, don't worry, I'll be fine. Promises to the dead are pretty demanding, huh? And I feel like he's talking about his father, but he went back to that crime scene. Okay, and he says he'll be fine. So instead, we see O'Brien there at the bed, and we see some people around him. And we don't get to see who exactly it is, but we know that they basically are going to chop off his arm. Yeah, he sees himself. Okay, so we see somebody there. I'm like, is it Azusawa? Was it Susagawa? We don't know. But they chop off his arm. And then, yeah, Shindo manages to stay awake throughout all of it. And they take him away, and then the bomber stays behind to blow up. Interesting. Interesting. So the question is, did the bomber get to O'Brien, and instead of just kill him outright, did the immigrants like work to get O'Brien out of there? Or did Azusawa work to get O'Brien out of there so that the Congress and the Bifrost couldn't have their full... Because it seems like Tori and the mom have orchestrated getting all these others out of the way and them taking over that entire sector and doing whatever they want with it, and they're just using Azusawa because they believe he's a tool. Did Azusawa find out, or did the others find out what was happening with Tori and hired Azusawa to be like a double agent and work for them to keep Tori and them from fully succeeding in their mission? Azusawa seems kind of like an agent of chaos, which would be perfectly in line for a Fox. So, again, I don't know. It's like, ugh. But yeah, and then of course, we get this like little flashback scene. So we find O'Brien somewhere, waking up without his arm. So what's he gonna do now that he's woke up? And then we have, in this other country, we have them saying, we're going home. And he says, the both of you. I like that we see Mai back when she had longer hair. And it almost looks like Kei's hair is like bleached. He almost looks like Atsumu from Haikyuu, where his hair's bleached. He's like, the army called my brother to active duty because of the war. Yeah, his hair looks bleached. So it seems like they were in Japan and they went home because Kei's brother was called into the war. But we know Kei's brother supposedly dies at the hands of Shindo's dad later on. So what's the deal? So they all knew each other before all this went down? And she's like, and I'm worried because of my mother. He's like, well, Dad says you'll both be conscripted if you go. And you're still going. He's like, that's normal outside this country anyway. She's like, I'm sure peace will come to our country too. Then we can come back to Japan. So they all knew each other before this stuff with his dad and their brother went down. Okay. He's like, we'll come back. It's so weird to see Kei with light hair. It's so bizarre. He's like, I'll be waiting. And then she stands between them and looks so... Now, she looks at all of them, at both of them, like she could see them. So, has she been able to see them the whole time? Was that a thing? Because her eyes aren't what they were. So, so I wondered this in the episode. I was like, did she have her sight? And then during the war, she lost it. And now they're doing the surgery to get it back. Is that what this is? Because if that's the case, well, hell, at least she's seen Kei before. At least she's seen him before she went blind. At least there's that. Yeah, you can see the undercut where Kei's hair was... His hair is darker undercut and he has like the light hair on top. Oh my God. So, okay. So she's like, let's make a promise that we're all going to come back together. It's a promise. Yep. And then she holds out the hands. We'll all meet again. Oh. So, yeah. Oh my God. They better all meet again. Yes, they better, or I will riot. So if something happens to Mai and Kay and Shindo where they can't be together at the end of the season, girl will riot. Psychopaths, don't do this to me. Don't do this to me. They have this beautiful friendship. Don't you do this. Don't you do this, Ricky Bobby. Don't you put this evil on me. So she might have had her sight and then lost it in the war. This show. But they're taking her away. I don't like this. Damn it. Son of a bitch. I'm going to look at some comments. Maybe. And wait just a hot second. But I'm not going to guarantee I'm going to wait long. Because I want to know what happens. So, that's going to drive me crazy! But anyway, in the meantime, that's okay. In the meantime, I'm curious to hear your comments down below. But I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. And yeah, I'll be back very soon with more Psychopaths. Bye. 2 inches! Show! How dare you!